For decades, the Palestinian national football team has carried a bigger weight than almost any other. They are a national team without a nation, flying a flag still unofficially recognised. And in 2023, Palestine's World Cup qualification journey began just weeks after the events of October the 7th, when the Islamist terror group Hamas killed over 1,000 Israelis, and has continued through the subsequent destruction of Gaza. Tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed, displaced, and starved. And many of the national team's teammates and coaches have perished too. So, in March 2025, as the 90-minute mark approached with Palestine 1-0 down to Iraq in the third-round Asian qualification match at the Amman International Stadium in Jordan, a miracle was needed. And one came. Wassam Abu Ali, a Danish-born striker of Palestinian descent, scored the equaliser before Amid Mahajna, an Israeli-born centre-back, headed the winner. An almost exact replica of Abu Ali's goal 7 minutes into added time. There were wild, emotional celebrations at the full-time whistle among Palestine's players, a diverse team drawn from the West Bank, from Gaza, its refugee diaspora, and also from Israel. And there was still a chance, a tiny chance, that the Palestinian national team might qualify and fly their flag on the biggest stage of all, the 2026 World Cup finals in the US, Mexico, and Canada. Football has been played in the Holy Land since the early 20th century, and although there's no official UN-recognised state of Palestine, chiefly thanks to a US veto at the Security Council, there is an officially recognised Palestinian national football team. And that is largely down to Sepp Blatter. You see, in 1999, Blatter had just been elected president of FIFA, and one of his first acts was to fly into Rafah on the Gaza-Egypt border, with future UEFA president Michel Platini in tow, to triumphantly announce that Palestine would become a member of FIFA. It was, Blatter would later explain, a chance to foster peace in the region. The 1993 Oslo Accords had provided a roadmap for peace and the creation of a viable Palestinian state. And a viable state, Blatter concluded, needed a viable national football team. So he arrived in Rafah with Platini and was given a hero's welcome. Now, a Palestine national team was built largely from players that came from Gaza and the West Bank, although an advert was put out in German football magazine Kicker looking for any players of Palestinian descent who might come and play for the team, some from as far away as Chile, where a significant Palestinian minority lived and played for one of the country's biggest club sides, Palestino. But the jubilation didn't last long. The Second Palestinian Intifada, or uprising, broke out in 2000, ending what was left of a moribund peace process, and the politics of the real world would frequently impinge on the football team. None more so than during Palestine's World Cup qualifying campaign for Germany 2006. Security issues meant that all home matches had to be played at neutral venues. Israeli movement restrictions meant players from Gaza, where Palestine's best players have traditionally come from, were not allowed to leave for their games. At one point, they could barely field 11 players. And the same thing happened again during qualification for South Africa 2010, when Palestine had to forfeit a tie against Singapore as it didn't have enough players to field a team. But surprisingly, Palestinian football boomed in spite of its privations. The Palestinian Football Association appointed Jibril Rajoub as its president. Rajoub was a controversial character, a former national security advisor to Yasser Arafat, who'd spent 17 years in and out of Israeli jails for throwing a grenade at an army vehicle before being exiled to Lebanon. He spoke fluent Hebrew and English and is now the Secretary General of Fatah's Central Committee, the highest decision-making body of the ruling nationalist political faction in Palestinian politics. Come July 2011, Palestine played in its first truly home Men's World Cup qualifier at the Faisal Al Husseini International Stadium in El Ram, outside Ramallah. A women's national team was set up, as was a professional men's league in the West Bank. Although there was a deep divide between the West Bank, controlled by the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, and Gaza, controlled by Hamas. So, as football in the West Bank grew, it deteriorated in Gaza under Hamas. Several football stadiums were destroyed by Israel during attacks. Israel said rockets were being fired from their pitches. But life and football still struggled on. And then came October 7th, the brutal slaughter of hundreds of Israeli citizens, prompting a ruinous response. Today, football in Gaza has been obliterated. According to the Hamas-run health ministry, more than 50,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel invaded and bombed the Strip. According to the Palestinian Football Association, more than 270 footballers, many of them children, have been killed. The Yarmouk Stadium in Gaza City was used to house hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom appeared to be children. FIFA has declined to comment. Now, Palestine's 2026 World Cup campaign began 3 weeks after the October 7th attack. With the security situation in the West Bank deteriorating as Israeli settlers took the law into their own hands, FIFA banned Palestine from hosting any home games. The squad and officials left overland into Jordan to prepare for their first World Cup qualifiers, which doubled as qualifiers for the 2027 Asian Cup in Qatar. They stayed on the road for fear that if they returned to the West Bank, they wouldn't be allowed back out. And they watched the horror in Gaza unfolding on TV. Our mind is with people in Palestine, because we see every day what's happening, said goalkeeper Rami Hamadi. Now, for the World Cup qualifiers, Palestine has had to play home games in Kuwait, Malaysia, Qatar, and Jordan, basically wherever they can find a home. But miraculously, they've reached the third round, with 2 games left. They play Kuwait away and then Oman at home in Jordan. Win both, and they'll likely reach the 6-team fourth round and have a real shot at qualification for the finals. We suspended everything, including the National League, but in spite of this, we have insisted on continuing our participation in competitions, and that includes the World Cup qualification, Rajoub told Al Jazeera. And if they make it, the Palestinian national team would reach their first ever World Cup finals, flying the Palestinian flag on the world stage. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.